Good morning. It is Monday, October 21st. Welcome to the Transportation and Environment Committee. We have 3 items on our agenda for this morning. The first is a review of Bill 1924, Taxi Cab Licenses, Amended Requirements. The second will be a briefing on the Safe Streets Act 1 year after its passage. And then the third item is a work session on the WSSC water spending control limits. And colleague Vice President Stewart will be joining us shortly. But first, let's take up Bill 1924, Taxi Cab Licenses, Amended Requirements. This bill does 3 main things. It would increase the permissible age of taxi cabs from 8 to 10 years. It would allow certain types of taxi cabs, those that are hybrid, electric, or wheelchair accessible, to continue in use for 12 years. And it would require taxi cab drivers who are in an accident to submit accident reports not only to the holder of the taxi license, but also to the Department of Transportation. And before we get a deeper review, I want to elevate the racial equity and social justice impact statement for this bill, which states, quote, "The absence of this legislation could risk job stability for taxi cab drivers who are disproportionately Black, increase costs for taxi cab companies owned by Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and reduce the availability of accessible transportation options in the county." And so this is an attempt to update and modernize our taxi cab fleet here so that more people can get to where they need to go in a safe and efficient manner. We have representatives from MCDOT here and the Office of Management and Budget, but first I'll turn it over to Ms. Wellens for any additional comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning. You were extremely thorough in the description, and I don't have much to add in terms of what the bill does. I don't know if you would like to hear from the panelists in terms of the purpose of the bill. There is one amendment that I would like to draw to the committee's attention at the appropriate time, and it's really just a clarifying amendment.
Very good. If our representatives from MCDOT could introduce themselves and share their thoughts.
Yes. Good morning, Council President and Council Member. My name is Sam Oji. I'm the Deputy General Manager for Division of Transit Services, Department of Transportation, and I oversee the Taxi Cab Regulation Unit as well.
Good morning. My name is Walton Harris. I'm with the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you. Mr. Oji, can you share with us a little more of the thinking as to why the county executive introduced this legislation?
The initial approach was in 2021 at the height of the pandemic, with supply chain issues as well as delays in purchasing newer vehicles by the cab companies. We were able to get an expedited bill to increase the age in service from 8 to 10. That bill sunsets at the end of this year. The second part of it is, as we reviewed the other neighboring jurisdictions, we identified that their year in service for their taxi cabs was much more than ours. Secondly, just for some relief for the taxi cab operators themselves, there's been an increase in cost of, whether it's purchase or retrofit of wheelchair accessible vehicles, which is, really needed by county residents. So those were the key core reasons why we kind of took this up in conjunction with the Taxi Cab Services Commission. We've had meetings with drivers, taxi cab drivers, owners of taxi cab companies, and they're all in support of this.
Fantastic. And I think also changing the lifespan of the taxi cabs is more reflective of the reality of the average age of cars that are out on the road, which are getting older because the vehicles are getting better and they're being better maintained as well.
Yes, and we will also continue. We have code enforcement officers who are out there inspecting these cabs, whether it's cosmetic inspection or actual, physical inspection of what their mechanisms, engines, and things like that. They also have to undergo the Maryland state inspection once a year. So we have no doubt that the vehicles, even with the increase in the age in service, will still remain fit for service.
Very good. And I'll just also note that I think I've spoken with Director Conklin on an occasion or two about some other regulations we might want to look at regarding our taxi cab fleet, specifically those that put our local drivers and operators at a competitive disadvantage compared to the apps and other national services that are available, but we can have that conversation at another point potentially. Councilmember Malcolm.
Thank you. Good morning. I just have a question somewhat related to the Ubers, Lyfts, that type of thing. So 2 questions about the reporting. So right now, accidents are not reported to MCDOT?
Right now, it's the driver has to report the accident to the owners, the people who actually own the PVLs, and then it's their responsibility to report to us. So what we're trying to ask is, at the time the driver reports the accident to the PVL owners, they also report to MCDOT.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do with that information?
It's documented. The first part of it is if there are any injuries, we also will get complaints from people who were in the vehicles when these incidents or accidents occur. And we need to validate both sides of statements that we receive relating to those accidents that occur.
And then is there any repercussions if there's a driver that has lots of accidents? Or
Yes.
How does that work? Yeah.
A driver who experiences an accident can lose their license to provide taxi cab service in the county if they have a certain amount of points. If they have too many at-fault accidents, all of those are factors into determining whether or not a driver can operate in Montgomery County.
Okay. And I take it that there's not, I shouldn't assume this, is there a corresponding responsibility for Uber, Lyft drivers to do the same?
The Uber and Lyft is actually regulated by the Public Services Commission by the state. Just to put it, so I'm sure they have, some responsibilities to report to the state, but not to us, because the county does not regulate
that licensing.
Services.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
It's great. Thank you for those clarifying questions. I have no other questions myself. Anything else you want to add for clarity?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to bring to your attention the clarifying amendment on page 3 of the staff memorandum. And thank you to Mr. Harris for actually pointing out the need for this amendment. It's to amend the title to clarify that this bill is expedited, which is of course important since the current law would be sunsetting at the end of this year.
Very good. I think expedition makes sense, and I see my colleague agrees. And without any other comments, your support?
Yes.
Great. So that is support for Councilmember Malcolm and myself. And we'll move this to full council. Thank you. Thank you both. If everybody wants to join. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. The second item on our agenda today is a briefing on the Safe Streets Act, which was passed last year in the fall of 2023, so it's been nearly a year, slightly a few weeks more than a year that the council passed this bill, which prioritizes pedestrian safety throughout Montgomery County by doing four things. It increases the walk times at crosswalks. It prohibits turning on red at certain downtown intersections. It requires collisions and site reviews for incidents that occur in and around school areas, and it also requires a traffic enforcement plan from the executive branch. This year alone, there have been 465 crashes involving pedestrians, cyclists, scooters, or wheelchairs. And to be specific, there have been 334 pedestrians hit, 94 cyclists injured, and 32 scooter-related crashes here in Montgomery County. And of those crashes, 19 pedestrians were fatally injured. Now, for broader perspective, since 2015, there have been 119 pedestrians and 12 cyclists who have been killed by motorists on Montgomery County roadways. And I know all of us here at the council hear from residents all the time about the maintenance and safety of our roads so that kids can get safely to and from school. Individuals can have after-dinner walks with their families, walk their dogs, ride their bikes, and just enjoy the great outdoors, especially this time of year during autumn. And as we take a look back on this legislation 1 year later, it's really important to see how it's being implemented, recognizing that there needs to be coordination with MCPS and also with the State Highway Administration. And so that's why I've requested this 1 year review to see how much progress has been made and probably more importantly, how much more progress we need to make. And so I appreciate Director Conklin, Mr. Holland, Mr. Paler joining us this morning, but I'll start with Mr. Kenny for any additional information he'd like to provide.
Thank you. So I won't go over everything in the packet because we have a presentation from our partners here today that will go over much of the same information. I will note that, Mr. Chair, you provided a good overview of the bill. The one component, the automated traffic enforcement plan, this committee had a joint committee work session with the Public Safety Commission a couple weeks ago, just for the record, where there was a broader discussion of that plan. Our partners here today have graciously provided some slides on that as well, if the committee should choose, but I've asked them to focus on the other components given the previous work session. There is information in the packet concerning the 9 collision site reviews and safe routes to school reviews that have been initiated, and the 31 and maps of the 31 intersections that have gotten traffic signal improvements for right turn on red and additional crossing time, known as lead pedestrian interval, in Bethesda, downtown Silver Spring, Germantown, and Wheaton. So happy to answer any other questions, but otherwise I'll defer to MCDOT and our Vision Zero coordinator to walk through the implementation of this bill.
Great. I'll turn it over to Team Transit to talk about, to either go through the presentation or highlight anything else that you'd like.
I'd just like to recognize the council's action to provide a supplemental appropriation last year that allowed us to accelerate work on this bill. So a lot of the progress that you've seen on the technical elements has been accommodated by that additional funding last year. So we wouldn't be as far along in this without that action. So just want to thank you and your colleagues for that. And aside from that, you're going to hear about progress in all of the areas that were mentioned. And I won't go any further because then there'd be no need for a presentation. But you'll hear about all of that coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Well, thanks for that introduction. You actually reminded me what I didn't write down was thank you for the supplemental, because that really does make this act move faster. So good morning, Councilmember Glass, Councilmember Balcom. My name is Wade Holland. I'm the Vision Zero coordinator with the Office of the County Executive, and I'll start our update about the Safe Streets Act of 2023, also known as Bill 1123. As Mr. Kenny mentioned, there are kind of three main elements. The one with the Automated Enforcement Action Plan was briefed 2 weeks ago to the T&E Committee as well as Public Safety Committee. The slides are available, so we have one kind of nice packet for all of the Bill 1123 updates, but we won't be covering that today. We'll be majorly covering the two pieces of the Safe Routes to School crash reviews and the traffic signal modifications, which are no right turns on red and lead pedestrian intervals. So we'll start with the Safe Routes to School infrastructure reviews. A lot of text on this slide, but this just kind of reminds everyone what is required for the Safe Streets Act and Safe Routes to School review. Some of these things we've been able to systematically kind of track now with having using the crash data as well as using the information we have about our school zones and our school walk sheds that are provided to us by the Montgomery County Public Schools to really track and see where these crashes are, make sure we refer them in a timely manner to the agency having jurisdiction. Oh, one more? Oh, one back, sorry. So in terms of setup, as Chris Conklin had mentioned, we have encumbered this funding to help support these reviews within Michael Paler's team, and he'll discuss that a little bit more. Develop the workflow between all the partners, between police, TEBS has also been involved, myself, and DOT, and the outside agencies as well. We have signed an MOU between the county government and public schools that identifies the roles for each agency as well as how often we'll meet. So we will send the crashes to all partners about once a month when the kind of last month's crashes are closed out, or not closed out, but have largely come in by that point. And meeting at least quarterly with Montgomery County Public Schools and the other partners to kind of further flesh out if there's any issues between the jurisdictions that we need to cover for the most recent round of reviews. We've referred crashes between January 1st of 2024 all the way through the end of September. And I guess I'll turn it over to Michael to talk about the MCDOT part of that.
Good morning, Chair Class. Good morning, Councilmember Balcom. Good to be here. And I just want to, again, acknowledge Mr. Holland's efforts in coordination and partnership in advancing the elements of this law. So if you'll pop to the next slide. There was a reference in the previous slide, a mention about referring crashes to our various agency partners, MCPS, law enforcement, State Highway Administration. As you can see from the slide, 8 of those crashes that have been documented, those 32 have gone to State Highway Administration. 5 of them have gone to Montgomery County Public Schools, and then 1 to the City of Rockville. The crash types is another thing where we talk about the non-motorists, where we say that where we've identified 25 pedestrians that have been involved in these crashes, and then 6 non-electric cyclists, and then the 1 non-electric scooter. And so one of the other elements is it's instrumental for us, and as we get this crash data and we start parsing it out and routing these to our other agency partners, and even at this time, one of the bigger elements is yet to come when we get to the point where we're at completion of our crash evaluations and we make a determination on improvements that need to be made, particularly as they involve the MCPS. That is when the heart of that coordination and communication is going to take place. What improvements we might want to proffer, and having an in-depth discussion with MCPS, because those improvements are going to be proximal to the schools where those crashes have been located. So,
real quick on this slide, it says for crashes by non-motorist type, 6 non-electric cyclists and 1 non-electric scooter. Are we differentiating between the motorized scooters and bicycles?
Yeah, so in 2024, we have a lot of new motorist crash types available to us that officers can mark. So it's not just ped, bike, other. We can now break it down between electric cyclists, non-electric cyclists, scooters. We use the term scooter loosely. That usually means like the 2-wheeled scooters, like a Lime or Lyft one you would rent, or most of them that we see in crash are actually the privately owned. But then if there's a scooter like a moped, because that's a registered vehicle. So the hard part is in the parlance, right? Scooter gets used for all of those, but a moped is still a moped for us. That's considered a motorized vehicle. Then the 2-wheeled scooters are considered a non-motorist type.
And so a battery operated scooter that we see that's more prevalent, right? That is not captured in the non-motorist type.
That would be it. If it was a battery that could get up to like 60 miles an hour, that would be a registered vehicle. Okay. So that's the difference between a non-motorist electric bike and what would be like motorcycle, obviously the lines are getting more blurred
Yeah.
with these vehicles, but usually that's up to the officer to make a determination. Usually comes down to the amount of power that that engine has.
Okay.
Or if it's pedal assist. If it's not pedal assist, that would be considered a motorcycle.
I'm not sure I clarified it for myself, but I understand that it's complicated.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pedals versus non-pedals would be the difference, yeah.
There you go. Thank you. If you want to continue.
Again, the only other thing that I was going to note on this slide is that the reports that we have in the pipeline for review and completion will be, the first of those will be done this fall. So, related to the traffic signal modifications associated with this law, we've identified more than 200 intersections in our downtown areas, in our urban areas, and also in that 1,300-foot radius to identify for LPI and no turn on red implementation. So as the slide indicates, we've completed 31 locations where we have implemented the no turn on red and the leading pedestrian intervals in the intersections in our downtown and downtown Silver Spring and Bethesda areas. And we're working outward because we note again that there are 200 plus intersections that we have to evaluate. And so we'll be looking at those 200 plus intersections between now and sometime in May before we start implementing all of them. And we are expected to complete the implementation by the end of fiscal year 25. And here are just some slides that identify the locations where we have implemented these treatments. The red is not covered by Bill 1123, and blue are scheduled for evaluation, and the green are actually completed. And so you can see that Silver Spring and a couple of other slides to follow Bethesda, Wheaton.
We're good. This is all really good information, so we're just going to hop in and ask on slide per slide basis.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bauer.
So thank you. It's not necessarily to the slide, but to the non-covered by the bill, the state roads. So I would assume that some of these state roads have no turn on red.
That is correct.
Is there a way to identify that so we know how many are covered?
Sure, we can go back and take a look at and identify or verify that all of those or the predominant ones have the NTOR.
Yeah, I think that would be good
Identification.
from the perspective of, we're lobbying the state to participate in having more no turn on red, particularly at schools. I know my intersection right near Northwest High School recently got a no turn on red on a state road. So I think it's important that we catalog those when we look at this.
Certainly.
Thanks.
And just to clarify and build upon that question and comment, the slides we're looking at, all the red dots that are not covered by this legislation, clearly these are state roads. Are those included in the 200 intersections that you identified?
No, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, I think, this is just we're just pushing through slides that show those areas. And then, so if you have any, residual questions associated with that, I'd be happy to answer them.
And for people who are following this conversation, those slides are in the packet, so you can see them and screenshot those if you want. Councilmember Dobbins? Okay, if you want to keep going.
The remaining slides are related to the automated traffic enforcement plan, which this committee has covered. Unless you'd like to, anything you'd like to go through again here.
No, we had a really good joint session with the Public Safety Committee. Clearly, we appreciate the work that has gone into the creation of that enforcement plan. And obviously, there's a lot more work that needs to be done with the state to supplement and enhance that plan, to make it as strong as it can be, to make our streets as safe as they should be. And we're looking towards the next legislative session and potential expansion of those programs. So all eyes are on Annapolis again. But if anyone is interested, you can go through the council website and find that hearing from 2 weeks ago.
I believe aside from those, the That's the completion. That's the end of the slide deck.
That's it. Okay. The other aspect that is that was not covered in the slides, but is included in the packet is with regard to the school reviews. Can someone speak? Can someone speak with a little more detail about the areas around the schools or the specific schools that have had incidents that have warranted reviews?
So there are, much to your point, there are 9 of these reviews that have been initiated to date, 7 of which have gone underway and are leading to reports, the first of which will be completed by early to mid next year. And if DOT wants to share any details on any of those, there are several intersections and then 2 stretches of roads, all of which are near schools and have had collisions that have warranted these studies. And I'll turn it over to DOT if they'd like to walk through more details on those.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. These intersections that have been identified in the packet, again, are ones where active reports are underway and slated for completion. We also want to recognize, again, going back to a previous slide in the deck, that there have been, 32 incidents. And, when we look at these, we're looking for trends. We're looking at, so when we've identified some particular trends here, left turn collisions are prevalent. So out of the 18 collisions that we're looking at, 6 of those collisions were left turn, vehicles turning left and striking pedestrians in the crosswalk. And then there are another 3 where pedestrians and bicyclists unexpectedly entered the roadway and were struck by vehicles. So those 2 particular crash types comprise 50% of the crashes as we've gone through this. So even as we look at these locations, these 9 intersections or so, or 8 intersections that we're about to complete the reports on, we're trying to look at trends and looking at treatments that might abate those concerns that we've identified so far.
Thank you for enumerating those details. So for the 6 incidents that have occurred when a vehicle is turning left, that is the case for LPI, right? Or were they not in crosswalks?
So they were in crosswalks. And out of those 6, 5 of those occurred at signalized intersections. So we're talking about a lot of 5 instead of the total 6. We also want to recognize that the leading pedestrian indication intent is to have pedestrians established in the crosswalk, and then again have the onus on motor vehicles to pay close attention and monitor their movement. And in these cases, that has been the matter. The pedestrians were established in the crosswalk in preponderance of these incidents, except for one of them, I believe, where there may have been a distraction. So the LPI that we're looking to implement at these locations is going to serve its function, but again, we don't envision that the conditions associated with those crashes that I just mentioned will summarily change or be addressed by the LPI because that establishment had already taken place.
Right. LPI is to establish the pedestrian there so that the driver sees them. And in those 5 instances, and I'm not sure if you have recall of all of those details, do we know who those drivers were? Were they students? Were they parents? Were they?
Yeah, I apologize, Chair Glass. I do not have that information, but I can get that if you
Yeah, I think that might be provide more insight into these particular instances. If they are fellow students and we know that there's more education that needs to happen, if they are parents or other visitors or guests, then I think they're dealt with in a slightly different way. But the more information we have about these types of situations, I think the better. But important to note that the 7 reviews that are underway are in Glenmont, Bethesda, Montgomery Village, Wheaton, Germantown, and Kensington. So they are throughout the county. This is not an isolated incident, as we all know, and the reviews are happening all throughout the county to make sure that all areas are safe. I do have a follow-up, though, with regard to the Montgomery Village. It's noted that there is an X2. Is that 2 times or 2 reviews?
There have been multiple occurrences at an intersection, and so that is the way that it was categorized. Maybe not to promote the question, but it was categorized that way to show separation between the incidents. Okay. So there are multiple incidents at that location.
And I believe my office and I think Councilmember Ludke's office are in touch with you all to work on that particular area as well, outside of this review. And then also noted that there 2 reviews have been initiated. Another one, well, that's the 2 times in Montgomery Village and then in Hillendale. So, okay. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So if there were 25 incidents that you think that might have people on their way to school, so how do the numbers jive with the initiated reviews? So do you look at all of them and then decide which ones need in-depth reviews?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Balcom. No, we look at all of them and then we begin the study. So sometimes when we get crash information, the initiation of the study may lag a little bit behind that particular crash notification, and that might be what you're seeing.
So after time passes, one would expect that every one of those would have a review?
That is correct.
Okay. And then how long do they take?
That depends. I would say that a typical review probably takes somewhere on the order of 30 to 45 days.
Okay. And so have any been completed yet?
No, ma'am.
Okay, great. And then the other question, are any of those involved with state roads?
So for a state road, those are referred to SHA through District 3 and the Office of Traffic and Safety.
So if there is a state road and a county road both involved in those accidents or collisions?
Yeah, typically the way rights of way is assigned, that if it's at an intersection with a state road and a county road, then the state road has jurisdiction, so those would be referred to the State Highway Administration.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's, as we go along and we get to the first report, I think it's important to know how many of those, what that differentiation is. And then also, I think for now, the time frame of when the accident was, when the review was initiated, when the review was complete, just so we have an idea for capacity and resources in the future, because I think this is something we clearly are committed to, and we need to know what the resource needs are in making sure that we get these reviews done in a timely manner.
Thank you, Councilmember Balcom. We'll make sure that we add that notation in the reporting structure so that you can be clear on that.
Great, thank you.
Picking up on those questions, what has the coordination been with MCPS?
So the major work after the bill was passed and then through the spring was getting the memorandum of understanding with them. So that is in place now. Since that has been in place, we've referred 5 crashes to them. They were all in MCPS parking lots. And so part of that, we're working with them to figure out how they're working on their side to figure out who all needs to be involved in their side for those reviews. What does that look like? And then we're also setting up regular check-ins with them to see if there's any places where between a county road and a school property that we need some more collaboration on that report, or if there's something on a school property they need a little help with from DOT, that we can kind of have those regular check-ins with them to make sure that those are getting reviewed.
Can you walk us through the process of first being alerted that a tragedy has occurred? Say a child was hit on their way to school. What then is the process to implement this and to get that area safer?
Yep. So there's a full workflow that we developed between all the different agencies and departments to make sure these are properly tracked and sent to the right jurisdiction. So the first part is once a month, police and I sit down. We go through the crashes that have been reported through and approved through the crash reporting system. We track it to see if it's in a school zone, if it's in a watershed. Can we have some sort of determination whether it's more likely than not that that crash involves someone going to or from school? Because the law doesn't differentiate between student age and parent age, so we have to kind of make some determinations about whether that trip was more likely than not someone going to or from a school building. And once that review is done, we package all of those, get the reports redacted, sending them to the agency that has jurisdictions, the county, state, municipality, or Montgomery County Public Schools is on schools property. And then that starts the shot clock for MCDOT to complete their reviews by 6 months. And as Michael mentioned, as they kind of get more used to the process, they kind of get the process down. That should be within like a 30 to 40 day window to complete that review.
Has that information flow and workflow, has it been smooth, or has it been bumpy or stymied in any way? I mean, the heart of the question is, have there been any turf battles as to who manages the safety of a particular area?
No, because I mean, it's pretty clear. Like if it's a county road, there's no one else to blame but the county. So, yeah, there's no hiding who owns the road. And that was kind of part of the MOU, was saying very, very clearly, like, who has jurisdiction needs to be the one taking on that review.
There were a few delays with staff-related changes at the various agencies, but I think everybody who was tasked with this responsibility in each agency followed through, and I think we actually got there maybe as fast as we thought we would on the interagency agreements.
Great. That is reassuring and good to hear. And yes, there is no hiding who owns a road, and so ownership is where it is. Taking a larger step back, do you notice any common themes or infrastructure problems or realities on the ground with any of these locations? Is there one common through line as to that, for a policy or a budget-related item that needs to be moved forward to ameliorate this moving forward?
Thank you, Chair Glass. I'd say that the only trend that I'm aware of in the introductory reviews of crashes is the left turn collisions with pedestrians. And again, we're talking about a sample size of 6 out of an undetermined amount, so it's really too soon to make a specific determination globally on what could or could not be changed. I can say that because we've had this condition at a particular intersection multiple times, then that intersection is definitely, and that's for the, the Steadwick and Montgomery Village. That intersection has our attention because that condition where the left turn crashes, that's occurred multiple times. So we're trying to figure out what needs to be done there differently to address that. And again, that's part of the process of review and making a determination of an action plan. But
I appreciate you identifying that particular location for that particular problem. Parents tell me and all of us all the time that they want more sidewalks, they want safer access, but you're not seeing the lack of sidewalks as being a predominant factor in any of these incidents.
that is correct, sir.
Reassuring there.
We did, and I apologize, I'll supplement my statement with the fact that we did observe one crash where a student was walking in the road when they were struck. But I believe in that instance there was a sidewalk, but I'd have to go back and verify.
And that's just another instance of just a bad driver. Right. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. The parking lot crashes, were those with pedestrians?
Yes, the 5 that we've referred to in MCPS, they were all pedestrians, yes.
And do we know if they were children?
I believe all but maybe 4 of the 5, maybe one might have been adults. I have to go back and look.
Okay.
And they were all because the parking lot, obviously, you have lower speeds. They
Sure.
were all very low to no injury crashes.
Okay, yeah, and I think that, it'll be great to see how the reports from MCPS, how quickly we get those as well, because I think those are critical. Yeah, thanks.
And we're now joined by Vice President Stewart, who just came from a ribbon cutting of a transit-oriented development. So clearly walkability is a factor for everybody who wants to move next to the Grosvenor Metro Station.
Yes, it was actually a great event, and my apologies for being late for committee. And if some of these questions have already been asked, just tell me to go look at the videotape, and I will do that. I appreciate this update, and very heartened by Director Conklin, what you said about things, the partnership and things falling together, because I think a year and a half ago when we were talking about a lot of these things, that partnership wasn't there. So I'm glad those conversations are happening. One question I had is, as the reviews are you're undergoing those reviews, are there ways of looking at planned work that you all are already doing in an area and possibly piggybacking onto some of that? Have you seen that as a possibility?
We haven't observed, to my knowledge, that crashes are occurring in locations where we are about to do work. But it's typical for our office when we're apprised of a crash of an incident where we have work scheduled or planned to either combine that work with another effort or supplement that work with a treatment that we believe might address a safety issue that has recently come to our attention.
And we also have the ongoing Safe Routes to School reviews in terms of walkability studies. So not only do we have these kind of one-off crashes, we also try and look at if we have a completed walk shed or upcoming walk shed study, how is that going to fit into that? Because the walk shed looks at every crash, every intersection, everything that's in that walk shed. So how does that, the kind of one-off, fit into the overall reviews? And also because we have a paving plan too, are there opportunities within the paving plan to affect those potential recommendations?
Great, thank you. How are we communicating with the public on these reviews and possible work?
So right now, at the completion of the review, we would publicize that particular document on the website. And if that document recommended accompanying work, we would reach out to the community association, the council member of that particular district, and let them know that we were planning work, and ask if the community wanted to meet to discuss it, or the council person wanted to discuss it, as we typically try to do with our other projects.
Yeah,
Councilmember Stewart, I think you missed the earlier discussion that none of those reviews have been published yet. They're going to be published soon, but haven't happened yet.
Great, that would be great. And I think even when the reviews are published, even if the work isn't, starting, it would be helpful just to have folks know about, the work that we're doing, the coordination, because I think as Chair Glass said, we hear a lot from residents about these issues, and I think it's important that they see that we're taking a proactive, a crash did happen, but we're, looking into that will be very helpful for the community as well. So thank you. I turn back.
Thank you. I have one final question. It's with regard to the 200 intersections that have been identified for leading pedestrian intervals and no turn on red. It was noted that 31 have been completed for LPI, and you showed the maps of where the no turn on red have been implemented already. What has the status been of those areas since those changes have been made?
So thank you, Chair Glass. It is too soon to say. When we look at data sets that tell us a change has been made in a safety quotient at an intersection, that data set is typically 1 to 3 years out. We take a look back when we do our evaluations of 3 years of crashes, and we start looking at trends based on that. In this case, the implementation has been, in my estimation, far too recent for us to draw any conclusions about the impact of the implementation. I do believe that it's appropriate for us to be taking at least an annual look at the crash data from the locations where these treatments have been put into place, to see what kind of changes from year to year that have been occurring as far as safety enhancements.
I appreciate the candor and agree with your recommendation that we make this an annual review so that we can see what those updates are and see if these changes as they're being made are keeping our streets safer, but glad to see that a lot of work is taking place, and the work will continue, at least with the intersections for leading pedestrian indicators, intervals, and no turn on red. That work will continue through FY25. So perhaps by the next year, we'll get that status update as well. And I know that when we review the budget too, that will be reflected in some of the work that you're requesting to continue making these updates. So without any further questions, just very much appreciate the work that all of you are doing, and those who are not here at the table, notably MCPS, but then also want to express our support for SHA and our colleagues in Annapolis who are continuing to push SHA to make similar changes, whether it is in state law or in their interest and support for working with us locally to make all of our roads safer. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for this update. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Kenny. And as Mr. Levchenko settles in, anybody who's here from WSSC in person, if they want to come on down, I know we'll be joined virtually as well. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all, and of course, good to see Commissioner Bayonet in the back. Also, I think General Manager Powell is planning. Yep, there she is joining us virtually. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Before we get into it, want to remind everybody, this work session on the WSSC water spending control limits is a continuation of the discussion that this committee had last month, and it was with regard to the FY26 budget. And we heard specifically about WSSC's needs to implement a meter infrastructure enhancement plan so that residents and customers can get their billing more frequently and more accurately, and know that if there are any leaks in real time. We also talked about the PFAS program and also the water lead reduction program. And so we're moving in the right direction, but this is an aging system, and it's fast, and the infrastructure needs are real. And so since the last conversation where we received this overview, there have been other discussions, notably discussions led by the county executives of both Montgomery County and Prince George's counties to determine what would be a good rate ceiling for the nearly 2 million residents of those two jurisdictions. And before we get into that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Levchenko, but first, if everybody could introduce themselves for the discussion. There you go.
Good morning. I'm Letitia Carolina Powell, and I am the Budget Division Manager at WSSC Water.
Thank you.
Good morning. I am Faria Babar, and I'm the Budget Section Manager at WSSC. Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us. And as noted, Ms. Powell is joining us virtually, so thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Levchenko, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, and I will provide just a quick summary of the first meeting and some of the key points you heard there because that will directly dovetail into what we're going to be talking about today. At the first meeting, you heard a summary of the spending control limits process itself, as well as what we call the base case the WSSC Water staff develop and those assumptions. And as you mentioned, you heard from WSSC Water leadership about their priorities going forward in a number of areas. It is important to emphasize that we are at the beginning of the budget process here. Whatever limits the councils approve are guidance to WSSC Water as they finalize their FY26 operating budget and perhaps consider adjustments to their recently proposed 26 through 31 CIP. However, these limits do not constrain the councils as to what they can jointly agree to by mid-May when we have our bi-county meeting. So very important to note, we're very early in the process. In terms of the schedule itself immediately, I've got on this slide here, we had a similar slide at the first meeting. The key point here is that the goal is to approve limits by the end of October. In this case, given the council schedule and where the Tuesdays fall, that would be next Tuesday, October 29th. The Prince George's Council's TIEE committee had a brief discussion on October 10th. They did not make recommendations at that meeting. I'm sure they're waiting to see what happens today, and then we'll work with staff between now and next Tuesday to see if the two councils can come to the same limits by then. We did receive a recommendation from the county executive late Thursday. We'll get into that recommendation in a minute. I did include that as an addendum to the staff report, so it is available online. Today's focus really is on several alternative scenarios that Montgomery and Prince George's county and council staffs asked WSSC Water to develop. But I did want to provide a very quick refresher on the base case before we get into those. So what I have up on the screen now are the FY26 spending control limits that the base case scenario assumes, as well as the out years, or FY27 through 31, and what those same limits would look like projected out. I also did want to emphasize that the base case assumes basically a same services operating budget. It looks at the main categories of spending and updates them for or projects them out into FY26. And then it assumes to fully fund the proposed CIP, which came over in late September. So it's sort of a same services plus CIP approach. What's not included in it, and this is very important, are new or expanded programs or costs for new positions. To the degree those end up in what is proposed early next year, though in the base case at least, that would have to come from either alternative savings elsewhere or revenue assumptions that are a little higher than what they're assumed in the base case. So to note for FY26, for example, the maximum rate increase shown is 12.2%. If there were to be additional programs or enhancements put forth by WSSC Water, their assumption in the base case is that that would have to fit within the 12.2%, and so other savings would have to be identified. And then just getting back to the rates themselves, I mentioned the 12.2 and 26. What that does do, though, by having that what is a historically large increase in 26, you do start to see the rate increases lowered over time from 27 to 31. And you heard from WSSC Water at the first meeting about in the past several years where they have come to the councils with, in their base cases, with certain rate increase assumptions, and the councils have generally approved slightly lower assumptions. And so that tends to push spending out or delay some of the costs that they're trying to tackle in that first year, but it does come back. And so what they're seeing again this year is a higher rate increase in 26, and then the lower rate increases as they go out. A major driver of the rate increase, and this is in some of the assumptions we talked about before, is PAYGO. The PAYGO and debt service, as I mentioned, was calibrated to accommodate the FY26 through 31 CIP, but it's also intended to help with their financial metrics. The metrics looking at debt service coverage and comparisons to their operating expenses and revenues, which are very important for the bond rating agencies. And we talked about that a bit at the first meeting as well. So the alternative scenarios that we'll talk about also are intended to try to keep those metrics at a level that they feel can accommodate those needs to maintain that support from the rating agencies. But that is a major driver of some of these assumptions, such as what PAYGO needs to be to accommodate that, and then, of course, the debt service related to the CIP. Given the high rate increase in 26, the alternatives that you'll see are intended to try to soften the rate increase in 26, maybe flatten the rates out a little bit over the 6 years, but still accommodate the metrics we talked about and identify what types of savings would be needed in order to do that. So what I suggest is I can go through them very briefly, and then we can then have a discussion after that. So what I've put on the board here are the rate increase projections for the alternative scenarios. You see the base case at the top, and then the three scenarios we looked at, which are basically named after what the first year rate increase would be. There's a 10.2% rate increase scenario, a 9.5% rate increase scenario, and an 8.5%. And then you can see how they tail out from there in 27 through 31. And I'll start with the 10.2% rate increase. These are the actual projected limits that you would see in 26 and then what they would be in the out years. But more importantly, I wanted to show what the changes would need to be in the budget based on their current assumptions in order to accommodate this increase. As we talked about at the first meeting, each percent on the rate provides about $9.5 million in revenue. And that includes both a volumetric rate increase, but also an equivalent fixed fee increase. So if you have a 1% decrease in the rate increase, if you follow me, then that means there's $9.5 million that has to come out of somewhere. If it comes out of the operating budget, then that's a fairly straightforward calculation, $9.5 million less. If it comes out of the CIP, it's a little more complicated as to whether it's PAYGO, which would also be a 1-to-1, or if it's debt service, which has a much higher leverage because their debt is over 30 years. It takes a lot of debt to equal $1 million in debt service. So that sort of explains how these numbers in some cases get big in a hurry. So if you look at this scenario, most of the decrease to get to that 10.2% scenario in 26 comes from PAYGO. But then you see in the future years, they have some unspecified reductions that would enable them to catch up to the base case scenario in starting in 27 and then as you move out. So the PAYGO takes a hit, and then to accommodate that PAYGO reduction, you have to make reductions in CIP spending in that first year. And as I show in the chart, that's about $23 million based on all these assumptions that would have to be either cut or deferred out of that first year. And then the resulting financial metrics from all this would be pretty close to the base case. The next scenario is the 9.5% rate increase, and actually you'd have the same rate increase would be needed in 27 as well, and then they start to decline a little bit after that. This scenario would require once again a big decrease in PAYGO. But to get to that additional lower rate increase, then you start digging into debt service and some unspecified operating expense reductions in 26. And most notably, that reduction in debt service means that the changes in CIP spending go up significantly because remember, they're trying to maintain their financial metrics, so they can't take all the PAYGO that they necessarily would to reduce this gap. They have to start taking it from CIP projects and from the operating budget. So this would require about an $84 million reduction in FY26 CIP expenditures. And to put that in context, their proposed CIP and information-only projects has about $700 million in spending in that first year. And many of those projects are ongoing, so they're all not candidates for deferring. But that $84 million then it gives you a sense of the ratio of what they would have to find. And then you have similar cuts that would also be needed in 27, and then continued unspecified reductions as well to then accommodate, get you back to where you would want to be at the end of the 6-year period, closer to the base case. And then the 8.5% scenario, this one actually would then require higher rate increases in 27 and 28 to catch up a bit more. It does also still require significant reductions in PAYGO and in CIP spending and unspecified reductions for several years. And once again, we're very early in the process. We don't know what those unspecified reductions would be, whether they're in the operating budget or the reductions in the CIP, what those would be necessarily. We have some candidate projects that are more flexible than others in terms of moving dollars around, but we don't know exactly what those adjustments would be or those impacts until WSSC Water were to review that. So those are the three scenarios. I mentioned the executive recommendation earlier. His recommendation was the 9.5% scenario, as noted in his transmittal. The executive also does recommend further discussions with between Prince George's and WSSC Water staff about the major assumptions in the operating budget and the CIP, and basically, of course, the review of the CIP. We have not even had a chance to dig deep into the CIP yet at all. So it's not unusual for WSSC Water to send over mid-cycle adjustments to their CIP proposal based on changes, for instance, with the Blue Plains projects or with other projects that they may have that they locally control. So in this case, what the executive would be assuming would be how would those cuts be achieved, basically, if you're at a 9.5% scenario or 8.5% scenario. From my staff's perspective, once again, it's early in the process. There's no right answer here, but my concerns with the 8.5% scenario were that it does presume higher rate increases in years 2 and 3, which goes against the concept of trying to flatten the rates out to the best we can. And then the 9.5% and the 8.5% both do require significant CIP reductions, or would require based on all these assumptions. And staff's a little less comfortable with that. The 10.2% scenario has a lower CIP impact, and it still requires some unspecified reductions, especially in year 2. But that gives WSSC Water some time to try to get their budget balanced over that period. So from that perspective, that staff landed at the 10.2, the executive landed at the 9.5. And with that, I'll turn it back to the committee and to our folks from WSSC Water here to answer questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Levchenko, for that thorough overview of the different rates and the implications, especially in the out years. As we've been hearing, we all want to stabilize the funding sources, recognizing that water efficiency and other technologies have changed the business model, if I can call it that, for WSSC. And so we want to make sure that the investments remain to keep our drinking water safe and clean. And so one question I have is, in the various scenarios, the same services budget, particularly with the 8.5 and the 9.5%, could WSSC share with us particularly the 8.5, because I think there's a natural inclination to have a lower rate as possible, so that the impact on our residents and consumers is as smooth as possible. But talk about the 8.5% and what that means for services and projects.
Well, the 8.5, as Mr. Levchenko mentioned, would result in much higher reductions to the CIP. in order to maintain, and also some decreases to the operating budget. We would be trying to maintain services as best we could, but the impact of the reductions that we make to the capital budget, while we have some projects under consideration right now, we have not yet decided which ones would take the largest hits, because that's still under discussion, review with our chief engineer, but it would have an impact.
Thank you for that response. And while we, are not trying to identify which specific projects would receive lower funding and might not be able to be completed, within a certain time period, can you provide a little more specificity about the types of projects that would be that would be harmed by an 8.5 increase?
I would say probably like water, sewer reconstruction. Those are some that are being looked at right now.
Okay.
I do want to note Ms. Powell has raised her hand on Zoom.
Oh, there she is, and her hand is raised. Thank you. Yes, General Manager.
Thank you so much. And just to build on what Ms. Carolina Powell was saying, I just wanted to again remind that the lead and copper rule that we have been anticipating was released last week. We met the deadline, the compliance deadline, to get our inventory of potential or unknown lead service lines that now have to be verified, and if there are any, then have to be replaced within 10 years. Our goal was to get that work started in fiscal year 2025, so by next spring, so that we don't have a very steep hill within the 10-year period, which would then drive up rates later potentially. We have a proposal on the table to our commission, which we have to continue to vet, on how that work would be paid for. We know from benchmarking other utilities that the ability to get that work done has been by providing some level of funding, because you will run into customer affordability issues on that end. So that's one program that we would like to move forward. We are also piloting for PFAS, where drinking water is concerned, and we're still awaiting additional information on how PFAS will impact regulations on the wastewater and biosolids side. I did want to note that this year's CIP, we actually reduced the program by $100 million when we rebaseline, and how we did that was to take some of the funding and shift it to focus on our water and wastewater treatment facilities, because we've been behind on investing there. So when you see the comparison year to year, you will see more in the facilities related programs and a little less in our linear infrastructure projects. It's the facilities side where we have been able to accomplish more of the CIP in any given year. Over 90% project delivery there. We've been behind historically on the linear infrastructure side, so that will give us a chance to catch up. But if we have to take more out of the CIP, it's going to come from the facilities. And that is where we have the biggest challenge and concern and risk with compliance if we are not making upgrades to those facilities. We want to certainly maintain our track record of being in 100% compliance for 106 years on the water utility side. So those are the types of projects that would be impacted. You have not seen many of those programmed in the published CIP as yet, because we have embarked on the facilities planning process to identify the large programs that would then make it into the CIP, because those would be at this point information only, and we've included them in our engineering services bucket. We increased the amount there last year so that we can accomplish more. We also moved some projects that had been in the operating budget to the capital side, and with the intent of paying for that work with PAYGO. So if we are not able to, and that's allowed us to keep the operating budget in check, but still get the work done. And since we needed to increase PAYGO to address the metrics issue, we thought that it would be appropriate to pay for those projects with cash. But that work does have to get done because it is critical to the operation and maintenance of our facilities. So just wanted to provide a little bit more in depth there.
Thank you.
On our CIPs.
Excellent. That is the response I was looking for, Madam General Manager, and recognizing also the federal mandates that are being put upon the organization, needing to accommodate and pay for that work, not only next year but for the years ahead as well. So I'll share my thoughts. I absolutely understand and appreciate the rationale for the 10.2% rate increase, and want to make sure that we achieve stability and meet all of the goals for the infrastructure work and the federal mandates. But I also recognize that this is a process that has to move between two counties and two councils and two county executives. And I will defer to County Executive Elrich and his recommendation for the 9.5% limit, because he is developing the county's budget for next year and has some insight into how fee structures and rates across the board, all of Montgomery County, might play for next year. And so I appreciate his memo from last week, and I'll support that 9.5% recommendation. Colleagues?
Thank you. I think that, as Mr. Levchenko said, we're early in the process. It's a long process, and we're not alone in this. We have to work with. We get to work with Prince George's County on this. I was really compelled by our last session and the significant work that needs to be done, and we can't just keep pushing this off. And so I'm comfortable with staff recommendation at 10.2. I think that I know that the WSSC, you came to us with the 12.2, and that request, I don't have any doubt that you need those funds. I appreciate Mr. Levchenko coming back with the 3 different scenarios to provide us with some kind of alternative to the 12.2. I just feel like if we don't meet the needs, I know if we don't meet the needs of today, we're going to meet them. We're going to have to meet them next year and the year after that and the year after that. So I feel comfortable with 10.2. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to say thank you to WSSC and the presentation last time you were here. Particularly, I think the slide that was very compelling for me was the one that showed the history of what the requests have been and what we've actually ended up setting the fee at, and that gap, and how having that gap accumulates over time. So I appreciate that slide this year. Mr. Levchenko, you did an excellent packet. I appreciate it a great deal. And as the chair lifted up stability, we talk about stability and predictability in the spending control limits, and I think that goes hand in hand with the slide we were presented last time. In addition to understanding what it means if we don't move forward on spending limits that allow us to fund the CIP and the facilities. I am gravely worried about what we are doing to our infrastructure. And I think we need to stop kicking the can down the road and hope that magically some solution is going to come up that we're not seeing. I think WSSC has done an excellent job over the last few years of really looking at what we need to do. We have so much more that we need to do. I know each of us, especially district council members, hear from constituents all the time about something, happening to our aging infrastructure. And you all can only respond with the resources that you are provided. We need to be looking long-term on how we fund WSSC as demand decreases, but to think there's going to be some magic answer that's going to come up while we continue not to fund at the rates we need to, the infrastructure, I think really scares me, quite frankly, for our residents and what they may face. So I'm going to agree with my colleague. I'd like to go back and see if we could do the 10.2 rate ceiling. And I also think as we're looking at the long-term funding, but also the financial metrics, we can't jeopardize the bond rating of WSSC, or we're going to be in a deeper hole in the future. And I think going below the 10.2 just jeopardizes too much and is too risky at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate my colleagues and agree with the goals that we want to stabilize and make sure that we remain having safe and clean drinking water and maintain the AAA bond rating and work through the multi-jurisdictional aspect. It is the reason why I had reached out to Prince George's committee chair, Eric Olson, about a month ago, requesting that we have a joint committee session to talk about some of these root issues and talk about a path forward. Their legislative schedule in Prince George's is different than ours, so they are in a flurry of legislative activity before they complete the calendar year, and so we were unable to have a joint committee. But again, as noted, there are 4 different bodies, 2 county executives and 2 councils that have to weigh in, and we'll see how this goes as we still are early in this process, but it is recognized that it's a 2-to-1 vote for a 10.2% ceiling. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Ovchenko. Thank you, WSSC, for this discussion. And with that, we are adjourned for the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, council members.
Make sure we were safe and it was a good experience.